Good evening. I'm Velshi. We begin with some new sound tonight from Barack Obama. And for the second week in a row, we're hearing his real opinion of President Trump's handling of the coronavirus crisis. The former president taking time during an address to African-American college graduates this afternoon to say this.
More than anything, this pandemic has finally torn back the curtain on the idea that so many of the folks in charge know what they're doing. A lot of them aren't even pretending to be in charge. If the world's going to get better, it's going to be up to you.
This comes a week after leaked audio found Obama labeling the coronavirus response a chaotic disaster. Meanwhile, the current president is focusing on a seemingly impossible promise, claiming this week we could have a vaccine ready to be delivered by the end of the year as part of something he calls Operation Warp Speed. Now, the fastest the medical community has ever developed a vaccine was for the mumps, and that took 4 years. Trump's statements contradict what medical experts say, that this virus isn't going to just go away, and we need a vaccine that can't be rushed.
There's never been a vaccine project anywhere in history like this. And I just want to make something clear. It's very important. Vaccine or no vaccine, we're back, and we're starting the process.
My concern is if we rush too quickly and consider cutting out critical steps, we may not have a full assessment of the safety of that vaccine. So it's still going to take some time. I still think 12 to 18 months is an aggressive schedule, and I think it's going to take longer than that to do so.
The development of this potential COVID vaccine cannot be waved off as a bipartisan squabble. The Lancet is among one of the world's oldest and best-known medical journals. It prints, quote, without preparation for the quality assurance of diagnostic tests, drugs, and vaccines, the world risks a parallel pandemic of substandard and falsified products. Interventions are needed globally to ensure access to safe, quality-assured, and effective medical products on which the world's population will depend, end quote. Let's bring in our panel. Dr. Nicole Lurie is a consultant for the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Initiatives and former assistant secretary at HHS. And Dr. Lipi Roy is an internal medicine physician and NBC News medical contributor. Welcome to both of you. Dr. Lurie, let me just start with you. You wrote that there are things that can be done at what you call pandemic speed in the development of vaccines. There is a limit to what can be done, but we can do some things concurrently as opposed to consecutively.
Right. Well, just to level set here, it typically takes between 9 and 15 starts to get to the end where you have a safe and effective vaccine. So already this is very ambitious, and it typically takes many, many years. Vaccine developers do things one step at a time. They stop and then do another. What we're trying to do globally is to do a number of things in parallel, whether it's human testing in parallel with animal testing, whether it's starting a phase 2 before you have the results of a phase 1, or most importantly, it's starting to manufacture vaccines before you even know that they work. That's probably the biggest innovation here. It's incredibly ambitious. It's very expensive. But if we want to have vaccine ready by the time we decide it's safe and effective, that's what we need to do.
And I've got a screen on the, I want to put that back up. I'm going to just ask my director to put that chart back up on the screen, because those are the various components of developing a vaccine. And Dr. Roy, what you can see there is the longest two parts of this by a long shot are the clinical trials, phase 1, 2, and 3, human clinical trials, and then the manufacture of the vaccine. There are other parts of it that either are accelerated, or because people have actually been studying some version of coronavirus for 4 decades, we may be able to get some things done. But in the end, if you are taking a vaccine that you are going to put into hundreds of millions of people's arms, you have to make sure they're safe, because we have had instances in the past in which vaccines have caused more damage than good, and that actually gives a lot of oxygen to this anti-vax movement that we have.
Yeah, good evening, Ali. You're absolutely right. I mean, as you pointed out before, the early the quickest we've ever been able to safely deliver a vaccine into a human being has been like 4 to 5 years. So we need to be really careful. And you're absolutely right that the actual, I guess, rate limiting step is the part that involves human beings, the clinical trials or the phases 1, 2, and 3, where we're first testing safety in a small group of volunteers. Phase 2, which is looking at a larger group based on age and the physical health of the intended population. And then phase 3 is a much larger group. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We have to test for side effects and various clinical manifestations of the vaccine, and that takes years.
And Dr. Lurie, let's just talk about the phase 3 part. We're talking about tens to hundreds of thousands of participants who have not got antibodies to a vaccine, who would reasonably be exposed to it because we have to test that they didn't get it versus people getting a placebo. So again, there's a certain amount of time. And I just want to be very, very clear. I'm on Donald Trump's side on this one. I would like it to be sooner than later, but you cannot wish it to be so.
You're absolutely right, Ali. And look, as doctors and public health professionals, we're all in support of something happening as expeditiously as possible, too. And to Dr. Lurie's point, a lot of this is happening concurrently, which is great, which may actually expedite the process. But that said, you cannot sacrifice ultimately patient safety, especially when you're going to mass produce and mass distribute something to potentially hundreds of millions of people.
Dr. Nicole Lurie, talk to me about. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
You have to remember that vaccines are given to healthy people. They're not given to sick people. So you have to be very, very sure that they're safe. There are probably some ways to accelerate things. We think that maybe there could be a couple 100,000 or a couple million doses may be made as a byproduct of this vaccine development and vaccine for trials. And we think that you can ramp up manufacturing while you're doing the trials. But I also want to point out for just a moment that for most of the companies that are making these vaccines, they've never had any experience scaling these up. So this is all very, very new. In my own experience, stuff always goes wrong.
That's what a lot of people have told us. And those timelines that we put up on the screen include the fact that stuff goes wrong. There's false starts. You're in the middle of a test and you realize people are having adverse reactions. So you've got to start again. The one thing that the government can be of use in is, I guess, bringing together researchers and making sure they all have the resources they need, helping to get the participants in the tests ready. But again, I point out the longest line in there is manufacture. Why is drug manufacture harder once you have a virus than manufacturing masks or gloves or anything like that?
Well, the manufacturing process is incredibly complicated. You have to grow the virus, you have to get it to express a certain protein. Some of it is dependent on processes like growth or fermentation. You have to have absolutely sterile, contaminant-free processes every step along the way. And when you move from one place to another in this process, you have to have all the conditions, temperature, humidity, everything else right. And the experience when you do all this is that stuff grows wrong. It's just a very complicated sequential process. As Dr. Roy pointed out, the other thing we cannot cut corners on is safety. And I just really want to stress that with your audience.
Yes, because we are actually looking for a vaccine that everybody wants, or almost everybody wants, and will line up to get in a big hurry. So we've got to figure that out. And I just want to be really clear. I think the three of us are probably exactly on the same page. Don't say it all that often, but I want Donald Trump to be right. I also want my viewers to understand that it is likely not possible that we will have a vaccine for distribution by the end of 2020. If that were to happen, that would be a miracle. I would be very pleased if that were to happen, but it is not likely. Thank you to both of you, Drs. Nicole Lurie and Lipi Roy. Thank you.